any government has to balance off all these interests and make sure that they're on the side of ordinary people, that we do deliver that fairer, that liberal society. And that's exactly what an SNP government will be doing. I hope and would believe that John Swinney should be the next leader of the SNP, someone that has demonstrated leadership competence, the ability to work across Parliament.
Returning now to the story of the day, the resignation of Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf is obviously dominating politics today and probably will for some time to come. The First Minister confirmed that he is resigning in a press conference at midday today, but said that he would stay on as the First Minister until his successor was appointed. We don't yet have a timetable for how long that leadership election will last. The SNP executive will meet and decide a timetable. The last time something similar happened, it took about 6 weeks. So I imagine the leadership election will consume Scottish politics for at least the next 6 weeks, and it will involve a lot of personalities. But let's speak to one of the people who stands potentially to gain quite a lot from what is going on, Neil Hanvey. He is the party leader and MP for Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath for Alaba. Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm obviously very nervous about how I pronounce your party's name. I've had
you can pronounce it either way, English or Gaelic. So English is straightforward, Alba, and Gaelic is Alapa.
Thank you so much for clearing that up, Neil. Tell us, obviously, I mean, an open question. Tell us how you're feeling, what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, it's been an extraordinary few days, to say the very least. I think Humza Yousaf started off last Thursday morning thinking that he was going to stamp his authority as First Minister on his government's programme and carry on, apologies for that noise, carry on without blinking. But unfortunately, events have overtaken him and events have overtaken him, and he's now a much diminished figure and has resigned as First Minister. There were, of course, other options for him to consider. We made very modest asks, things that shouldn't have been a difficulty for an SNP First Minister. But he's decided, I think probably under pressure from his own party, to take the decision to resign.
So
what we effectively have now in Scotland is that we have Patrick Harvey, who is to all intents and purposes the First Minister of Scotland, and the Green Party are now firmly in charge and will dictate what happens in the Scottish government. It's a completely situation.
That's a fascinating answer, Neil, because it opens up two kind of lines of inquiry, if I can put it that way. So one of the things you're saying there is potentially a new SNP lead. I mean, because I was going to ask about what deals you could still do, because there'll be, I suspect, 3 or 4 candidates for the leadership of the SNP. You will no doubt talk to them, but so will the Green Party. I mean, will you engage with the candidates who are running and put your proposals to them about how you might support an SNP administration until the Scottish elections?
Well, I mean, I speak to people in the SNP all the time. I've got lots of friends who are still members of the SNP, both in Parliament and out with in the general membership. So, you know, this is a matter of discussion that will carry on. However, at the very heart of this is the Greens. We know because of events over the last few days, the Greens' commitment to independence is a mirage. We know that their commitment to the climate, indeed, is a mirage, but their commitment and determination to force through queer theory-based gender identity policies is absolute. And it seems that the SNP have caved to those demands, even in the face of the devastating findings of the Cash Review, which Patrick Harvey continues to try to rubbish.
What is interesting is you say you've got a lot of friends in the SNP, but there must be personality politics at play when you engage with the SNP, because obviously Alex Salmond, you, Ash Regan, all former SNP, both leaders and prominent figures. I mean, there's an element, obviously, of SNP, the SNP leadership not being particularly your fans of yours, given the position you've put them in. It'll be difficult to negotiate with them, won't it?
I mean, I would reverse that position. The SNP have put us in an impossible position because we were being asked, indeed it was insisted that we support policies that we felt were a danger to the safety of women, girls, and indeed the safeguarding of children. And as someone who has worked in the NHS for many, many years, I understand child protection and safeguarding incredibly well. And I wasn't prepared to be silent on those issues. And that is the nub of where the problem lies. Now, in terms of the SNP, there's this very small number of people, unfortunately, they are in incredibly influential positions, who are resistant to working with the ALPA party. The general membership, there's a very warm relationship between many of us in ALPA and them. There's a few voices that make unhelpful comments on either side, but that's the nature of politics. But certainly our core ambition of delivering independence should really overcome any sense of difficulty on an interpersonal level. I mean, if you want to be the grown-ups in the room, you need to be able to see beyond some of your personal ambitions and actually collaborate on the bigger picture. But that's not the case in the SNP. That certainly it became an intolerable place for me to be. I had absolutely no choice but to leave, and thankfully the ALPA party came along just at that time, and I joined enthusiastically.
This goes against slightly the spirit of the answer you just gave me, but the Tories won't want an election. The SNP won't want an election. The Labour Party probably does want an election in Scotland. What's your view about having an election in Scotland and how it could be engineered?
Well, we had a National Executive Committee meeting at the weekend. So all of our office bearers, and we took a briefing from Ash Regan about how things were developing in the Scottish Parliament. Of course, her relationship is absolutely pivotal in all of this because she is the member of the Scottish Parliament. I sit in Westminster. So in terms of where this will go in the long run, it's difficult to predict. But Ash will have our full support, and we took the decision at the weekend to get ourselves on a Scottish parliamentary election footing. So we're making preparations in case that does happen. But what's clear is that I think, as Ash Regan said earlier today, the Scottish Green Party have become the 1922 committee of the SNP.
Brilliant. Neil Hanvey, ALBA's MP in Westminster, thank you for coming on the show. It's quite clear, I think, from Neil's remarks to me that the ALBA line will be that the Greens are the tail that is wagging the SNP dog, and you can expect to hear a lot more of that over the next 4 to 6 weeks as the SNP look for a new leader. In fact, now is the perfect moment to speak to Ian Blackford, the former leader of the SNP in Westminster, still an MP. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Good afternoon.
I thought that was an interesting interview with Neil Hanvey. I mean, I don't know whether it's a nightmare for you or just interesting that the ALBA party now has, to a certain extent, an element of influence, but they're clearly going to run this line for the next few weeks that you, the SNP, are being effectively run by the Greens.
Well, they wouldn't they? But that is certainly not the case. What we will make sure that we do with our new leader is we seek to work across the House, so we seek to build consensus. And the programme that we were elected to deliver in 2021 is one that we do. This is a crucial time that we're coming through, dealing with the cost of living crisis, make sure that we're giving leadership in that transition towards net zero, the opportunities that there are for Scotland from green energy, and show that we have the leadership, that we have what it takes to be worthy of the trust of the people of Scotland, whether that's in the Westminster election or in the Scottish election that will follow in 2026.
Can I read you this text from Stuart? Because I think it goes to the heart of perhaps the dilemma the SNP faces. I've long campaigned for independence. Reality is there's only one man in the whole country who can make it happen. Keir Starmer, he's never going to do it. Independence is done for now. Carping about it instead of running the country is why the SNP is in the hole it is. That's the nub of the kind of accusation, the charge sheet against the SNP, isn't it, Ian?
Well, I think when you look at the reality of where we are, we've been in government since 2007. We've had the trust of the population for a long time. I accept that we've got to show that we are worthy of that. But if we look at polls at the moment, I acknowledge that we have slipped to some extent over the course of the last year, but support for independence is still round about the 50% or so. I think it's up to us to show the necessary leadership, to show that Scotland can be that greener, that fairer, that more prosperous country with independence. Put that vision out to the people of Scotland and ask people to back us. And in the end, whether you're talking about Keir Starmer or anybody else being in number 10, there's a basic question of democracy. And that is, if the people of Scotland are demanding that right to have a say in their future, that's what should happen. No one can deny the rights of any country to be held within a union against its desire. That's what we'll seek to do. We will give leadership to those that support independence, recognise the challenges that we have of getting the economy moving, delivering sustainable economic growth, reflecting on the many good things we've done. Let's think about the child tax payment, for example, that's taken 100,000 young people out of poverty. Reflect on the fact that our government under Hamza Yousaf is the only part of the United Kingdom that hasn't lost a single day to strikes in the health service over the course of the last year or so. So there are many things to be proud of, but let's make sure that we're on the front foot, that we have that vision, that we have that leadership, and we can take to the opposition the challenges that we'll face in the Westminster election and beyond.
I mean, that's an interesting answer, Ian, because it does make the point, I think, that, you want to talk about the SNP's domestic successes if you're going to win back voters. And there's one argument that says that independence is a distraction at this point in time. There is another argument put by Catherine, who's texted in, and it's put very bluntly. The SNP were repeatedly told that women wouldn't wished, and they refused to listen. Putting the rights of women, children, and biological reality below the wants of a vocal minority has scuppered two leaders. Kate Forbes is the right successor, says Catherine. Now, we know what she's talking about. She's talking about these issues about gender identity and so on. I mean, that a lot of people, whatever you think about those issues, a lot of people thought they were minority issues and not the fundamental issues that Scottish people needed addressing.
Look, I think at the end of the day, if I look at the journey that the Scottish Parliament has been on over the course of the last 25 years, we have become a much more liberal society, and I welcome that.
Yeah.
The issue of rights for everybody, whether you're talking about women, children, trans rights, are important, and it's how you legislate for that in the round. But of course, in doing so, you've got to make sure that you're concentrating on the bread and butter issues, on health, on education, on the economy. Any government has to balance off all these interests and make sure that they're on the side of ordinary people, that we do deliver that fairer, that liberal society. And that's exactly what an SNP government will be doing. I hope and would believe that John Swinney should be the next leader of the SNP, someone that has demonstrated leadership, competence, the ability to work across Parliament. We need to recognise the challenges that we face, and where anyone has any questions that they need to be answered, that we show that we are doing the right thing for everybody in the society that we seek to represent.
So I was going to ask you, Ian, because I mean we've both been around Westminster for a while. We both know as political nerds that although we may feel for Hamza Yousaf, we'll all be thinking about who the next leader of the SNP is. You've very kindly said who you're backing, John Swinney, who I can see walking around being followed by television cameras in Westminster. Will you be seeing him this afternoon?
I have no plans to see John this afternoon. I've spoken to him as I've spoken to many people over the course of the last couple of days. John has a long track record in the SNP, in government, Deputy First Minister. I think crucially, John has an awful lot of experience of being a cabinet minister in a minority in administration. The Scottish Parliament works on the basis of minorities, and it's about how you can reach out, how you can make sure that you can build consensus, that you can get your legislative programme through, that we can rebuild the SNP, show that we can drive up support ahead of the Westminster election, for example. And I think John has the skills, the characteristics, the personality to be able to do that.
Ian Blackford, former Westminster leader of the SNP, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for not being frightened about saying who you're going to be backing as the next leader of the SNP. That is fascinating to hear.